Hello everyone and welcome to the School of Serenity. In this video, I want to talk about 10 common types of addictions that are caused by anxiety. My intention is not to criticize anyone, but to highlight the fact that most addictions have their origins in mental health issues. Identifying and acknowledging these types of behaviors are the first steps toward healing and enjoying life. Why does anxiety cause addictions? The short answer is that addictions serve as a distraction from the real source of unhappiness. We tend to rely on short-term gratifications that our addictions provide to turn our consciousness away from the root cause of our anxiety. The real source of unhappiness that we are trying to run away from is that we do not like the person we see in the mirror. I'm going to share my thoughts on this topic in another video, so stay tuned by subscribing to my channel. Back to the topic of addiction. Everyone has some unresolved mental health issues that they need to work on to some degree. Even those who put on a brave mask and pretend that they're just fine have some inner work to do. I would actually argue that those who pretend to have perfect lives are the ones who suffer the most. Having anxiety and developing an addiction to cope with it is not something to be ashamed of. Addictions show us that we have not chosen the right solution to deal with stress and anxiety. Anxiety is actually a great teacher and is telling us that we are doing something wrong. It is signaling to us that we need to change the way we have been doing things in order to find our path in life and achieve fulfillment. The first step in starting our path to happiness is to be able to recognize the type of addictive behaviors we engage in to cover up our mental health challenges. Here are the top 10 addictions that indicate unresolved emotional and mental health issues. Number 1, alcohol. The social acceptance of drinking can make alcohol addiction hard to spot. Despite its legal status, alcohol consumption has numerous negative consequences. The initial effects of alcohol, like the euphoric feeling, are pleasurable. However, alcohol will interfere with how the brain uses dopamine, the feel-good hormone. When alcohol is constantly used, it decreases the natural ability of the brain to produce dopamine. Alcohol actually starts to inhibit the ability of the brain to feel pleasure. As a result, the person needs to drink more and more alcohol to feel pleasure. Due to these changes in brain chemistry, the withdrawal symptoms of drinking are severe. Number 2, nicotine. People will reach for a cigarette during times of stress, believing that it'll give them quick relief of anxiety. Nicotine is addictive because it induces a temporary relaxation and elevated mood. However, the relaxation and elevated mood do not last long, which is when the body begins to crave another cigarette. The nicotine in cigarettes is as addictive as heroin. It changes the brain as it develops extra nicotine receptors to make space for the doses of nicotine. When the brain no longer gets the nicotine, withdrawal symptoms including anxiety, irritability, and strong cravings for nicotine will occur. Number 3, social media. Feedback you receive on social media websites, such as getting likes or comments on your posts, release dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure in the brain. When you experience more dopamine after using social media, your brain identifies this activity as a rewarding one that you ought to repeat. Over time, we start craving more and more of this type of action. Social media is a readily available distraction for people who suffer from anxiety and depression, but the positive feelings experienced during social media use are only temporary. Therefore, as the feel-good dopamine wears off, the person will go back to the source for more. Number 4, shopping. Shopping can be a distraction from unpleasant emotions, offering a temporary high that may help people feel better about themselves and feel less anxious. People with a shopping addiction feel unable to stop shopping. This is particularly true at times of stress and anxiety. Compulsive shopping can lead to all sorts of financial problems, which can turn into a new source of stress and anxiety. For people without a shopping addiction, buying something can be a fun diversion or a necessity. On the other hand, people with compulsive buying disorder feel compelled to spend money so that they can feel normal. When they cannot shop, they might feel angry, frustrated, or grumpy. Number 5, porn and sex. Compulsive sexual behaviors are classified as a mental health disorder. They are defined as repetitive sexual activities becoming a central focus of a person's life to the point that they neglect their health and personal care or other interests, activities, and responsibilities. For example, experiencing an uncontrollable compulsion to view porn can be problematic for some people. Those who use pornography regularly have intense urges or cravings for sex, particularly when they are anxious. There's a link between heavy use of porn and dissatisfaction with life and relationships. Number 6, food. Food craving occurs when you experience an urge to eat something despite having already eaten or being full. This is pretty common and does not necessarily mean that someone has food addiction. Most people get cravings. However, if cravings happen often and satisfying or ignoring them becomes hard, they may be an indicator of something else. These cravings are not about a need for energy or nutrition. It is the brain calling for something that releases dopamine, a chemical in the brain that plays a role in how humans feel pleasure. Food becomes a means for us to momentarily escape reality. Number 7, video games. Video game addiction is compulsive and uncontrollable use of video games in a way that causes problems in other areas of the person's life. When game playing is addictive, it takes over as the person's main way of coping with life, with other important areas of life being neglected or disrupted as a result. Video game addiction has been an increasing concern for parents as video games have become more commonplace and are often targeted at children. Multiplayer online role-playing games are in particular more addictive in nature. As a result, they tend to have greater negative impacts on physical health, sleep habits, and academic performance. Number 8, work. The original reason the term workaholic was coined was to demonstrate the parallel between work addiction and alcoholism. The connection between the two is probably more real than you might think. Although excessive work is often well regarded and even rewarded, there are problems associated with work addiction. Work addiction is driven by compulsion rather than by a healthy sense of fulfillment that is common among people who simply put a lot of effort and dedication into their job. This is usually a coping mechanism to distract the person from their personal and inner challenges. Number 9, drugs. Drugs are chemical substances that can change how your body and mind work. The brain changes from addiction can be lasting, So drug addiction is considered a relapsing disease. This means that people in recovery are at risk of taking drugs again, even after years of not taking them. Drug addiction is a chronic brain disease. It causes a person to take drugs repeatedly despite the harm that they cause. Drug use is dangerous and can harm your brain and body, sometimes permanently. It can hurt the people around you, including friends, families, kids, and unborn babies. Number 10, gambling. Gambling addiction is the uncontrollable urge to continue gambling despite the toll it takes on one's life. Gambling is addictive because it stimulates the brain's reward system much like drugs or alcohol can. In fact, gambling addiction is the most common impulse control disorder worldwide. Similar to addictive substances like meth and cocaine, gambling addiction is associated with release of dopamine within the brain. Gambling affects the brain's reward system and releases up to 10 times the normal amount of dopamine. Continuous use then causes the brain to develop a tolerance as natural production of dopamine is inhibited, and as a result the body will need more and more of the stimulating substance in order to receive the same rush. I hope that you liked my video about our addictive behaviors and anxiety. If you have any comments or suggestions, please add them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, and also hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Stay serene, take care, and thank you.